The morning of my 70th birthday, I woke up at 5:30 out of habit. 43 years of waking up early to make breakfast before my husband left for work. And the body doesn't forget, even after the man is gone. I lay there for a few minutes listening to the house. It's a particular kind of quiet that only empty houses have. Not peaceful, just absent. I got up, put on my robe, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. While it brewed, I looked at the table. I had set it the night before. 7 chairs, 1 for me, 6 for the people I had called my family. By noon, I would be eating alone. I need to go back a little because the birthday is not where this story starts. It starts 4 years earlier, when my husband, Howard, was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's disease. He was 68. We had been married 41 years. Howard was the kind of man who fixed things, not just in the house. Broken disposal, leaky faucet, the fence that kept coming loose at the corner post. But in conversations, in relationships, in rooms where tension had built up until people stopped talking. He had a way of saying the exact right thing without making anyone feel small. Our kids adored him, or I thought they did. We have 3 children. Our oldest son is 44 now. He lives about 2 hours away in Columbus, works in commercial real estate, and has for the past 10 years been very good at being busy. Our daughter is 41. She and her husband moved to Scottsdale 6 years ago, and somewhere in that move, the distance became more than geographic. And our youngest, another son, is 38. He still lives in this state 40 minutes from me, which I used to think meant something. When Howard got his diagnosis, I called all 3 of them the same evening. I sat at the same kitchen table, and I dialed each phone, and I explained what the neurologist had said, what the progression might look like, what we were hoping for. Our oldest said he would come visit soon. Our daughter said she would research specialists in our area. Our youngest said, "Mom, let me know what you need." They were good words. They were the right words. None of them came for 6 weeks. Howard noticed. He didn't say much about it. That wasn't his way. But I caught him sometimes looking out the front window in the afternoons, watching the street the way you watch for someone you're not sure is coming. He had always loved when the kids pulled into the driveway. He'd hear the car and be on his feet before the door opened. That watching became part of our days. Howard by the window, me pretending not to see him doing it. The calls started about 8 months after the diagnosis. Our oldest called on a Tuesday evening in October. He needed help with a down payment on a new property. Not his home, an investment property. He framed it as an opportunity, the kind that doesn't come twice. He needed $40,000. He said he would pay it back within 18 months. He had a whole plan. I listened to him explain it for 20 minutes. I asked him when he'd last come to see his father. There was a pause. He said things had been crazy at work. He said he was planning a visit for the holidays. I transferred the money 3 days later. Howard didn't know. I didn't tell him because I didn't want him to feel like a burden. Like the reason our son was calling was the diagnosis and not the love. Our daughter called in February. Her husband's business had hit a rough patch. I won't go into all the details because I don't fully understand commercial ventures in Arizona, but the short version was they needed $25,000 to cover some gap I couldn't entirely follow. She called it a bridge loan. She said, "Mom, we wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate." I asked if she was planning to visit her father soon. She said spring, definitely spring. I sent the money. Our youngest called in April. His situation was different, more personal. He and his wife were having trouble, he said. They needed a fresh start. Could I help with the security deposit and first few months on a new place? It wasn't a large number compared to the others. $9,000. He picked up within 1 ring when I called back to confirm. He didn't come in spring. I want to be careful here because I am not a perfect person, and I am not a perfect mother. I made mistakes when they were young. Howard and I both did. There were years when work took up too much space. Years when I wasn't as present as I should have been. I know that. I have sat with that knowledge for a long time, but there is a difference between a family that is imperfect in working through it and a family that has quietly, without a conversation, reclassified one of its members. I was a resource. I had become useful in a specific way, and that usefulness had replaced whatever else I used to be to them. I don't know exactly when I understood that. I think it built slowly, the way water damage does. Invisible until the ceiling starts to bow. Howard's condition moved faster than the neurologist had projected. By his second year, the tremors were more frequent and his balance had become unreliable. We got a shower chair. We rearranged the bedroom furniture. I learned to be present in a way that didn't make him feel watched, because his dignity mattered to him more than almost anything. He had a bad fall in January of the following year. He was fine, nothing broken, but it frightened both of us. I called all 3 kids that evening. Our oldest texted back within the hour. "So sorry to hear, Mom. Give Dad our love. Things are nuts here. We'll try to get up soon." Our daughter called back the next morning. She was sympathetic, warm even, and somewhere in the conversation mentioned that things in Scottsdale were still tight, that they were hoping the first quarter would turn things around. Our youngest came over that Saturday, which I give him full credit for. He stayed for 2 hours. He helped Howard to the couch and they watched football together. And when he left, Howard looked more like himself than he had in days. That visit kept Howard going for weeks. He mentioned it over and over. It was good to see him, he'd say. It was really good. The next visit was 4 months later. Howard passed away on a Thursday in March. He was 69 years old. The hospice nurse was there, and I was there, and the room was quiet and familiar and completely shattered. All 3 children came to the funeral. I will give them that without caveat. They came, they stood with me, they accepted condolences and shook hands and said the right things to the neighbors and Howard's old colleagues. Our daughter held my hand during the service. Our oldest gave a eulogy that was genuinely beautiful. He spoke about his father in a way that made me understand he had loved him, somewhere under everything. I held on to that. I needed to. After the reception, after the casseroles arrived and the flowers were arranged and the last car had pulled out of the driveway, I sat in Howard's chair by the window and I thought, he waited his whole last year for them to come, and they came for 3 days after he was already gone. I didn't say that to anyone. I just sat with it. My 70th birthday was 11 months after Howard died. I had decided to host a small dinner, not a party. I'm not a party person, and neither was Howard, but a dinner at the house with the people I loved most. I cooked for 2 days, pot roast the way Howard's mother used to make it, the recipe she gave me before she passed. Twice baked potatoes, green bean casserole, a lemon cake from scratch because birthdays without cake seemed like a statement I wasn't ready to make. I set the table for 7. Me, our 3 children, our daughter's husband, and our oldest son's girlfriend, who I'd met twice and liked both times, and our youngest's wife. I had confirmed with all of them the week before. Everyone said yes. The dinner was at 6. By 6:15, I had heard nothing. I called our youngest. It went to voicemail. I called our daughter. She picked up on the 4th ring. She was in Scottsdale. She said she had meant to call. Something had come up with her husband's work. A trip. A meeting. I didn't fully catch it, because there was a kind of roaring in my ears that happens when your body knows something before your mind has accepted it. She said she was so sorry. She said we would celebrate when they were back in the area. She said she loved me. I hung up and called our oldest. He answered right away, which I remembered because it surprised me. He was at a conference in Chicago. Had been since Tuesday. He said he had assumed I'd rescheduled when he mentioned the Chicago thing last month, and I had no memory of that conversation. But I also know that grief does things to memory, so I cannot say with certainty whether it happened. What I can say is that no one confirmed it with me. No one asked. No one called that week to say, "Mom, do you want to do this another time?" I didn't call our youngest again. I sat down at the table I had set for 7 and I ate dinner alone. The pot roast was good. Howard would have loved it. I blew out the single candle I'd put on the lemon cake, and I made a wish I won't share here. And then I covered the cake in plastic wrap, and I sat in the quiet for a long time. There is a version of this story where I called a lawyer the next morning and changed my will. I have seen stories like that, the clean revenge narrative, where the ending is a legal document and everyone gets what they deserve. That's not quite what happened. But it's close. I did call a lawyer. Her name is Marion. She's been my attorney for over 15 years, handled our estate planning when the kids were still in school, updated everything after Howard's diagnosis. I called her 2 days after my birthday and I made an appointment. Sitting in her office, I had to say it out loud, which made it real in a way it hadn't quite been yet. I told her about the loans. The full amount was $74,000 across 3 years, none of it repaid, none of it discussed since the checks cleared. I told her about Howard's last year in the empty driveway. I told her about my birthday and the 7 chairs. Marian listened without interrupting. She's good at that. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "What do you want the outcome to be?" I thought about that question for longer than felt comfortable. I said, "I want them to understand that I saw what happened, and I want to make sure that the people who were actually present for my life are the ones who benefit from it." Marian nodded and started writing. I also called my sister-in-law, Howard's younger sister. Her name is Wanda, and she lives about 40 minutes east of me, and we have always gotten along. But we got closer after Howard died because she was the person most willing to say his name out loud without flinching, which matters more than people realize. I told Wanda about the birthday. She listened and then she said, "Did you think it would be different?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said I thought it might be. I thought that losing their father might have changed something, that a milestone birthday might feel different to them than an ordinary Tuesday. I thought wrong. Wanda said, "Howard knew. You know that, right? He knew who they were and he loved them anyway, but he knew." I had to set the phone down for a minute after that. 4 weeks after my birthday, our youngest called. Not about money. I want to be clear about that, because I checked my own suspicion before I picked up, and I was prepared for it to be a request. But it wasn't. He said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." He said he had been thinking since Dad's funeral. He said he knew he had not shown up the way he should have, not just for me, but for Dad. He said the Saturdays he came versus the Saturdays he didn't. He had done the math in his own head, and he didn't like the number. He said he was ashamed of the birthday. I let him talk. I have learned, late in life, that the most important thing you can do in certain conversations is not fill the silence. He said, "I know I can't fix what I didn't do, but I want to be different. If you'll let me." I said I appreciated him saying it. I said I needed to see it, not just hear it. I said I loved him because I do, I always have, and love and accountability are not opposites. He has come over 11 times since that call. He had dinner here on a Sunday and brought his wife, and we sat at the table and talked for 3 hours. And it was the first time in years that the house felt like what it used to feel like when Howard was alive and the kids were younger and everything was louder and more chaotic and, somehow, more full. I noticed it while I was washing dishes after they left. I stood at the sink and I thought, this is what I was missing. This specific thing. Our oldest has called twice since the birthday. Both times were brief. Both times he mentioned, without being asked, that business had been unpredictable. I listened. I responded. I did not offer anything. Our daughter sent a birthday card, late. It arrived 12 days after my birthday, postmarked from Scottsdale. Inside, she had written a short note about how she thought about me and hoped I had a wonderful day. She signed it with a small heart. I put it on the refrigerator. I look at it sometimes and I feel something complicated that I don't have a clean word for. She is not called to make plans. The thing I keep coming back to, the thing I turn over in my mind when I can't sleep, is a question Howard asked me about a year before he died. We were sitting on the back porch in the evening, late summer, that particular quality of light that makes everything look gentler than it is. He looked at me and he said, "Do you think we raised them to need us or to love us?" I didn't know what to say. I told him I thought we raised them to love us. He nodded. He looked back out at the yard. I think about that question differently now. I think about what it means to raise children and what you're building toward, whether the relationship you're creating is one that will hold weight when tested, or whether it was always more fragile than you understood. I think about how easy it is to confuse the presence of love with the presence of ease. They were easy to love. That's different from the love being deep. I don't say this with bitterness. I say it as a woman who is 70 years old and still figuring things out, which is either sad or hopeful depending on the day. Howard's sister, Wanda, has become one of the most important people in my life. She comes over on Wednesday afternoons and we sit on the same back porch Howard and I used to sit on, and she tells me stories about when Howard was young that I'd never heard in 41 years of marriage. He was apparently a terrible driver as a teenager. He once tried to surprise their mother by repainting the kitchen and chose a color she described as aggressive. He cried at the end of Field of Dreams every single time and tried to blame allergies. I didn't know any of that. I love knowing it. My neighbor Ellen also checks in regularly. She's 72, widowed 6 years ago, and she has the kind of practical wisdom that comes from having already been where you are. She brings food she claims she made too much of, and I do the same thing when I cook more than I can eat, and we both know exactly what we're doing, and neither of us says it. And there is my granddaughter, our oldest son's daughter, who is 16, and for reasons I don't fully understand, has decided that her grandmother's house is a place she wants to be. She comes on Friday afternoons and does her homework at my kitchen table. And sometimes we talk for hours about things I didn't expect a teenager to want to talk about. History, relationships, what I was like when I was her age, what her grandfather was like. She asked me once, "Grandma, do you think people can change?" I said, "I think some people do. I think it takes more than wanting to." She thought about that. Then she said, "Do you think Dad is going to change?" I looked at her for a moment. I said, "I hope so. I think he has some understanding in him that hasn't come out yet." She nodded like that was a real answer, which I suppose it was. My will has been updated. I won't detail it here because some things are private, and the point of changing it was not to use it as a weapon. The point was to be honest about what my life actually looked like versus what I once assumed it would look like. There are people who showed up for me. It makes sense that my intentions would reflect that. I told our youngest about the changes, not the specifics, just that I had made them. He said he understood. He said he wasn't calling to change my mind. I believed him. I have not told the other two. If they ask, I will be honest. No one has asked. I am writing this, or I suppose I am telling this, because I have talked to too many women my age who are holding some version of this story and carrying it alone because they don't want to seem ungrateful or difficult or like a mother who speaks poorly of her children. I am not speaking poorly of mine. I am speaking honestly about them, which is different. Howard loved them completely. So do I. Love is not the part that was missing. What was missing was something simpler and harder to manufacture, The willingness to be present when presence was inconvenient, to show up not for a funeral, not for a check, but for a Tuesday in February when your father's hands are shaking and he's watching the street out the front window. If you are a mother reading this and you recognize this feeling, that specific weight of being needed in the ways that serve others and invisible in the ways that would serve you, I want you to know you are not imagining it, and you are not obligated to keep funding what isn't being reciprocated. That's not cruelty. That's just honesty. There are 7 chairs at my kitchen table. I have not removed any of them. Last Sunday, 4 of them were filled. Wanda, Ellen, our youngest son and his wife. We had pot roast, same recipe as always. Someone told a joke I've already forgotten, but I remembered laughing until my eyes watered. After dinner, my granddaughter texted to say she was coming by. She'd lost track of the time at a friend's and could she come for dessert? I said yes. She arrived 20 minutes later with pink cheeks from the cold and sat down at the 5th chair and had 2 slices of cake. 6 chairs. 1 still empty. I looked at it at the end of the night and I thought, not yet. But maybe. Howard would have liked that ending better than a closed door. He always believed in the maybe. It was one of the things I loved most about him, the stubborn, gentle, open-handed maybe. I'm trying to hold on to that for him, since he can't hold it himself anymore. I used to think that love was something you either had or you didn't. A fixed thing, like eye color or bone structure. You loved your children and they loved you, and the rest was just logistics. Who called, who visited, who showed up when the driveway needed shoveling or the hospital waiting room needed filling. I don't think that anymore. What I understand now at 70 is that love without effort is just sentiment. It's a feeling you carry around and reference occasionally, like an old photograph you keep in a drawer but never actually look at. Howard loved our children that way, completely, without condition, and so did I. But somewhere along the way I confused my love for them with evidence that they loved me back in the same fashion. Those are 2 different things. I had to sit alone at a table set for 7 to finally see the difference. Here's what I know about cause and effect. Strict of anything mystical, the way you treat people during the ordinary, inconvenient moments of their lives is what builds or dismantles trust. Not the grand gestures, not showing up for the funeral when there is no alternative, the Tuesday phone calls, the Saturday drives that weren't asked for but were made anyway. Our youngest son understood this eventually. Not because someone told him, but because he did the math himself and didn't like what it added up to. That kind of honesty, turned inward, is rare. It takes a specific kind of courage to look at your own behavior without softening it. That's the intelligence part, not book learning, not credentials. The willingness to examine yourself without flinching and then actually change direction. I spent 41 years married to a man who did that quietly and consistently. Howard never announced his growth. He just grew. I am trying to do the same, late as it is. The resilience part is harder to talk about because it doesn't look heroic from the outside. It looks like eating pot roast alone on your birthday and choosing not to let it make you smaller. It looks like calling a lawyer and making practical decisions about your life without apology. It looks like setting the same 7 chairs the following Sunday and watching 4 of them fill up, and deciding that is enough for now. Not settling. Deciding. There is a difference. I am not a cautionary tale and I am not a triumph. I am a woman who gave a great deal to people who didn't always receive it well, and who is now, in the last portion of her life, being more deliberate about where the giving goes. That's not bitterness. That is just what wisdom costs and what it buys. If I could say one thing to a younger version of myself, the woman setting the table for the first time, the woman who assumed the family she was building would hold its shape, I would say this: pay attention to who shows up when there is nothing in it for them. That is the only list that matters. Build your life around those people. The rest will take care of itself one way or another. Howard knew that. He tried to tell me. That evening on the back porch, in his quiet way. I just wasn't ready to hear it yet. I'm ready now.